Good afternoon. Welcome to Successful Sutton and our webinar as part of our series of webinars that we're running here to help you businesses in Sutton and anywhere to understand more about how to cope with the current situation we find ourselves in and how, as we emerge out of lockdown as businesses, we continue to grow and thrive. This afternoon, we have our usual panel of experts with us, and we're particularly today focusing on the very important subject of health and well-being. Now, that's a term that many of us are very well aware of, and perhaps a year and a half ago might have been something that we perhaps were aware of its importance, but maybe hadn't embraced fully. But I guess over the last 18 months, we've really all come to understand exactly what health and well-being means to both us personally, to our staff and to our businesses. And as we come out of lockdown, this is going to be a really important subject. And this afternoon, we want to help you to understand how you can get help and advice and guidance in this area for both you and your staff. And we'd like to do that by encouraging you to talk to us. So before I introduce our panel, I'd just like to remind everyone who's watching live that you can talk to us this afternoon. You can do that by using the Q&A function on your Zoom panel, your control panel, and you can also chat to us using the chat function. If you put your question into the Q&A, I can then ask that on your behalf to our panel. Before I launch the panel, I just also want to let you know that we are going to do our usual poll, which we're about to launch. This is just to try and establish how you're all feeling as we're coming out of the current restrictions and exactly what other support you might be looking for help with. And this will help the team at Successful Sutton to think about what might be needed moving forward as we come out of the current situation that we're in. So just take a few seconds to answer that. That would be really, really helpful. And whilst you're doing that, I'm going to introduce you to our panel. This afternoon, I have with us everyone knows now Patricia Park from Successful Sutton, and I'll pass this over to her in just a few seconds. She's the bid manager for Successful Sutton, and she's the reason we're here because it's her team that have pulled this series together. So we're grateful to her for doing that. Then to Helen. Helen, no stranger anymore to Sutton, and in your business, the HR department is based in Sutton, and certainly over the last year, you've gone above and beyond through webinars and other support information to make sure that businesses are really up to date with the HR rules. And I'm guessing this subject is top of your list of priority at the moment, and we'll hear from you in a few moments. Then welcome to Jane Knight, another Successful Sutton business. And Jane, you're going to be talking to us particularly about women's wellbeing and a particular contract that you're delivering. And then finally, I have with me Khalil Renar. Sorry, I've stumbled over that as I knew I would. But hi, Khalil. Good to have you with us. Khalil is a director and a wellbeing consultant at Renar Wellbeing, and they work alongside loads of businesses, small, large, medium, and anything in between, and specifically working with business improvement districts to give advice, guidance, training on this subject. So in turn, we'll come to all of you and hear from you. But just to remind you, if you are watching this live, we would love to hear from you, hear about your experiences, maybe what's gone well for you, what hasn't gone well for you, and also what help and advice you think you might need in this area. So before we go any further, I'd like to pass over to Patricia. Hi, Patricia, welcome. Tell us, first of all, a little bit about Sutton High Street now that you've reopened. How's it gone?
It's actually going really well. It's really quite odd because we were out and it's very sunny and there's loads of people about and everyone's being very safe doing the social distancing, but it's just so lovely because I was able to walk up and down this weekend and just actually see people I haven't seen for nearly a year in some cases. So actually being able to run into people and really catch up and see what's going on with everybody. And then obviously we've got a lot of people coming out and shopping. So I think it's a bit of a shock to the system because a lot of our bars and restaurants have got pavement cafes now. So obviously now they're completely overwhelmed where they've been really nice and quiet with the takeaway. It's all kind of gone a bit mad for them. Which is brilliant on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's kind of addressed a couple of needs around supporting staff as well as we're talking about today, but also looking at the fact they might need more. So they weren't quite as prepared as maybe they thought they were. And there's actually a much bigger crowd of people coming to the town centre than we expected. So it's all good, really, which is great, which is a great start for us for the rest of this year.
And great that the weather's being kind at the moment. That certainly helps. It still gets a little bit chilly, I find, around about 8-9 o'clock when you're sat outside. But it's worth it to be a bit cold, to, as you say, not to have to see people in these Zoom boxes is a wonderful experience. I didn't realise people had any body below their sort of chest down. So it's good. It's good to see real people again. It's fantastic. So thanks for that update, Patricia. I want to come over next, if I may, to Helen. Helen, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing from an HR perspective at the moment.
So thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Patricia, for inviting me along today. Really pleased to be here to talk about employee wellbeing. It's such an important topic, and it really does have bear a difference on the bottom line. If you get your employee wellbeing strategy in place and make it the centre of what you do, you're going to be looking after your people, and you're going to be benefiting from that with productivity, from employee engagement, and reducing sickness absence. Now, this year we've had so many changes for employees in different types of roles. Patricia, you mentioned cafes having had no business or been doing the takeaways and now being inundated with people. You know, employees have got to get used to any sort of change that's happening. The same with people that have been on furlough and are being asked to come back to work. Some of them are going to be very anxious about that. Some people are very pleased to be on furlough and don't want to come back. Some people are desperate to come back. So there's so many different things for employers to think about, and make sure you're communicating and talking with your employees and looking after them. And I promise you it will make a big difference to your business if you can take some steps to get that right. So hopefully we can share quite a few of those things today.
Great. And particularly at this moment when many people are being brought back in from furlough, which is to some people a great thing, to other people a scary thing, and to other people perhaps something they don't want at all. So managing that whole environment must be quite tricky at the moment for employers.
Absolutely. Everybody's different, and everybody's got a different circumstance, and everybody's got different anxieties, different desires and needs. So it's really hard as an employer or a manager to get it right, but you've got to kind of do your best to talk to those employees and find out how they're feeling and what type of support they need. But it's not an impossible task, but it's a difficult one. Is
there a sort of an actual sort of new policy that you need to put in place as a business? Is there sort of a furlough type? I mean, how does it work? What should a business actually be doing to work this one out? So businesses should have had furlough agreements in place, and they should have specified what might happen, and hopefully businesses have been and will continue to talk to their employees while they're on furlough, so give them some notice about how the business is doing, what's likely to be happening, and then making sure that when you know that something's going to change and you're going to ask them to change the way that they're working, whether it's to come back to work from furlough, whether it's the change in the cafes with people coming in, changing in shops with people coming in, moving back to offices where people go, well, we've been working quite well at home, thanks. Do I need to come back into the office? Of course, some people will be desperate to get back into the office, and you'll be telling them, you can't come in at the moment because we don't know what we're doing with our office. We haven't made it COVID secure, or we might not have our office anymore and we need to look for a smaller office. So there's so many changes that are going on. It's all about your communication policies, really, and then thinking about what flexibilities and what support you can offer to your staff. So one question related to that I have is around if you are being asked to come back to furlough, but in reality you're being asked to come back to a different job, which might well be the case because businesses have had to change and pivot and become different things. But sort of under each HR rules, how does that leave somebody? I mean, are they actually entitled to say, do you know what, I think my job's redundant, I'm therefore not needed, I would like redundancy, or are they forced to have to come back into a new role?
Well, of course, we've never been in this situation before. We've never had a period of furlough. We've never had a pandemic. So we don't have anything particularly to rely on. Under normal circumstances, employers should and would consult with their staff. So if you want to change something as an employer, you would be talking to your staff and telling them what's happening, why it's happening. And if there's a redundancy scenario, it would normally mean that some type of work is reduced or is ceasing to happen. So if you are in charge of painting things white and now things need to be painted blue, then you have to consider, well, is it reasonable to say, well, actually, you're doing the same thing, you're just doing it in a different colour. So actually, it's really reasonable for the employer to say, don't come back on the white team, you're coming back on the blue team. If you're being asked to build something completely different and that you don't have those skills, and that's a different story, and perhaps it would be a redundancy scenario. So it's going to depend on each circumstance as to what's happened. And again, I'm going to repeat myself a lot today, but it stems around communication. Hopefully, if employers have managed to anticipate the changes that might be coming along, we can't anticipate them all. We certainly didn't anticipate what was going to happen at the start of last year. Then talk to your employees. And we all know we were in the middle of a pandemic, or maybe coming to the end of a pandemic. I don't know where we're at in terms of the virus, but we all know it's been very difficult. So hopefully employers and employees can just have some sensible conversations and work something out. So, if you get asked to come back into a role that you just think is not right for you, then talk to your employer about that and say, look, this doesn't feel right. It's not the role I left, and I don't think I'm right for it. It might be a good opportunity, though. So, you never know. There might be something good. I
think one thing is certain is, I'm sure you've been absolutely inundated and you've been very busy, but I guess that's going to continue because this is all unprecedented ground, and actually seeing how it does actually pan out is going to be tricky for a lot of people. So your help and advice is really very much appreciated at this time. So let's introduce Jane. Hi, Jane. Jane, you're from Successful Mums, and you do a number of things. I'll leave you to explain what you do, but specifically today you wanted to talk about a new GLA contract that you've recently won, haven't you? So over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Jane from Successful Mums, and we've supported about 6,500 women back to work or to start a business. And we connect these skilled women with local employers. And in fact, I started off at Sutton. My first contract was with Successful Sutton, so I feel really warm with a group of people. So the connection with the project that we've got around wellbeing is we're lucky enough to have some funding from the London Mayor to encourage local Sutton employers to embrace flexible working and women's wellbeing. So part of that, I suppose, the purpose behind it is the Mayor did quite a lot of research and could identify that there were less parents and less women that were being recruited by Sutton, Croydon and Merton employers. So they wanted to encourage local employers to take on these people, and how could they do that? So one of the things that we do in terms of this project is we talk to employers about how they can link with skilled women and what they can put in place to attract these skilled women in the workplace. And one of the things that I think we're sort of starting to talk about a lot more now, a bit like mental health, is the menopause policy. So if a third of the working workforce are of perimenopause or menopause age, it's really important that we are talking about it, and employers do have something in place in the workplace to support these individuals. And it's a simple policy, and some of the processes, it could be as straightforward as having a discussion with your manager, making sure you can open windows if you want to, if somebody feels hot, and being able to talk about it. I mean, hormones, none of us can get away from any hormones, can we? Man or woman. So I think a bit like mental health, and there's an absolute link there as well. It's important, if there's a policy in place around the menopause and women's well-being, then you're going to attract the right people in the first place, and they're going to be positive and want to be as productive as they can. So
that's really
in women's wellbeing for your existing staff, but also to reaching out and attracting new talents. Then we've got a huge talent pool of women that's we could put forward. And it's free. It's completely funded, so there's no recruitment fees at all. It's just tapping into our workforce.
So what does that mean then if you're a business watching this? What is the message? Do they need to contact you? How can you support them specifically through this programme?
The project is to encourage Sutton, Croydon and Merton employers to take on parents and women in the next 2 years. So if that sounds like you and it's something you want to do to benefit from this particular sort of individual group, then just get in touch and we can arrange to identify where you are in terms of your flexible policies, for one being not flexible, two at all, 10 being really flexible, and then how we can sort of move you up that scale and be more flexible in terms of embracing that style of working, and how it could be good, firstly for the business, because businesses obviously need to run and be profitable, but secondly, how you can tap into all of these skilled women and look after your workforce.
Okay, that's great. Well, you pop your, if you haven't done already, pop your details into the chat so that people have got that, but we'll come back to you, I'm sure, a little bit later on. So hi, Khalil, welcome to you. So everything you're hearing, I'm sure, is, absolutely what you can resonate with, given the role and the company that you run. So tell us a little bit about that and how you can help businesses in this area.
Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely, as Helen and Jane have said, right, it's such an important thing to look after your staff's well-being, but I think they also stressed really about asking and staying in touch with your employees to understand what their needs are. And everybody has such different well-being needs, different approaches to it, different understandings and experiences of their well-being. And so it's really important to have those tailored approaches. So as an organization, we're in our well-being. So we're a workplace well-being consultancy. So we work to really sustainably improve employee well-being. So we don't want to just kind of come in and run 1 or 2 workshops and have a spike of well-being and then go, see you later, tick that box. We really want to support companies to have a lot of long-term benefits. As Helen said, there's improved productivity, performance, but also your staff are going to be happier and healthier. And so the way that we support the range of organizations that we work with, we work with a company with 53,000 staff across 130 countries, right the way through to small startups based in London, is one by helping them to develop wellbeing strategies, and really having that from an organizational standpoint and having policies around that, and help them to understand what their staff need, and then developing bespoke action plans for those organizations off the back of that. And we focus on a holistic approach. So we'll look at helping employees with mental health, but also physical activity, sleep and nutrition, whilst also looking at how companies' managers and culture really impacts that. And so actually later in June, we're running a intro to manager wellbeing training workshop for Sutton bid members. So it's free for bid members to attend. So really come if you're a manager and you're looking to support your team. And on that point, we also then run a lot of virtual workshops. We have, if you look at our website, and I'll share it on the chat, that it's just renairwellbeing.com. You can see that we run a lot of different workshops there around mental health, men's mental health, sleep, nutrition, champion training. And lastly, we do live mindfulness sessions. And so with Mental Health Awareness Week coming up, nature is the theme this year. So we've been running walking mindfulness sessions to support people to get out into nature. But really, we're kind of your one-stop shop for all things workplace wellbeing, and try and understand companies' needs and support them with that.
I'm interested to know how your business has changed in the last year, because obviously, as I said in the introduction, health and wellbeing, we all know about it before COVID, has come to the fore. What have you seen in terms of demand of the different areas? How has that changed over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, it's just really exploded. And I think I can say I run a workplace wellbeing consulting now without having to explain what workplace wellbeing is to start with, which is quite nice. We'll go, okay, cool, nice wellbeing. I've heard that's important, right? So that's nice. Then we have, just from a demand perspective, we haven't had to do any outbound business development since October. Which is an amazing position to be in. And so we're growing quickly. And the way that I see that is positive and negative in a way, right? If there's more demand for wellbeing support, does that mean overall people's wellbeing is decreasing? Maybe, maybe not. But where I really see the positive in that is that people are becoming more and more aware about the importance of employee wellbeing. They're more aware about their own well-being, and they're starting to look for support. So it's not only just, in 2018, for example, one of the biggest mental health questionnaires and surveys came out, and 74% of people felt so stressed and overwhelmed to the point that they were unable to cope. Whereas now, hopefully people are going to start going, I'm stressed and anxious and I know what to do because I'm starting to seek out the support and get the tools and tips that work for me as well. And it's not just generic, hey, go for a run, to be more active. Hey, maybe do some mindfulness to improve your mental health. We're really kind of starting to help individuals know what their needs are and help organizations understand how to support their staff, rather than going a finger in the air. What's Google doing? What's that best practice case study over there doing? Let's copy and paste it here, because that's not always going to work. So I think companies are also seeing that there's kind of individualized needs and unique needs, big or small.
I think that, if you're a big organization, clearly you've got the resource and the time and to try and put these policies in place. And I think, what is quite important for this afternoon is just to try and stress that if you're a small business, I run a small business, and actually, how practically can you help in a way, yes, we are all stressed. We're all, suddenly having to do loads of different things. And, actually the challenge of working from home and working in this Zoom environment is actually quite stressful. And I know I found that I have no time, because you're not actually spending any downtime traveling anywhere. In the old days, you used to finish one meeting, have half an hour when you walked or travelled to your next meeting or got back to the office, grab a sandwich on the way. Now you're literally on a Zoom call, and then you look in your calendar, you think, oh, I'm going straight into another Zoom call. And I'm going straight into another Zoom call. So that whole sort of, we all thought we were busy before, but hey, we didn't realise we could get busier. But in actual fact, we have, because we don't have that downtime anymore. And that's obviously going to change as we get back into that hybrid solution. But, for small businesses watching this, what would be the first step? They reach out to you, how would you initially go in and try and support them and work out what they need?
Yeah, so there's many different ways to do this, but just on your initial point, Catherine, on small businesses, and sometimes, when we speak about workplace wellbeing, they go, oh yeah, but we only have 5 people or 10 people, or it's just me. But actually, proportionately, right, if 2 of your staff out of the 5 are struggling with well-being, that is such an impact on your kind of human capital, that it's going to impact your business far, far more than if you're a huge global corporate and you have 1 out of 1,000 people being impacted. And so almost it's more important for those small organizations. And this isn't something that has to cost thousands of pounds and take 3 staff to manage. Right. And so with to your second point, how do organizations start? How do they start figuring this out? So either we've run with some organizations recently, have a wellbeing workshop series where we just start highlighting what workplace wellbeing means, that, it's not just becoming a yoga guru and never having cake again and, always working, that, we look at making small but sustainable changes over time, that even going from 0 to 10 minutes of physical activity a week is better than nothing and can still have benefits. And people start going, oh, okay, and I have permission, I can give myself permission to look after my well-being. And it is relevant to do in the workplace. It's not woo-woo or whatnot, and then go in and help employees to come up with their action plans. But if an organization really wants to develop a well-being strategy and go about this from that perspective, we usually come in and run a workplace awareness workshop. Then we carry out that needs analysis through a staff survey, which looks at kind of all 4 areas of well-being that I spoke about, as well as company culture, how they feel managers support their staff, and then asking managers how they feel about how comfortable and skilled they are to support their teams. We do a lot of interviews as well, and then work with maybe the HR lead or the wellbeing lead within the organization, or founder if it's a small company, to understand what existing policies are in place that are working already. And we found a lot of companies, especially over kind of 2020, were doing a lot, and then they're coming to us and going, look, we kind of tried it, it was good, we now want to do this properly. Let's figure out what worked when they did that, what isn't working so well, if anything, right? And what the staff need and want. And that's the most important piece. And we'll talk about that in the manager training session that I'm going to run later. But you have so many well-meaning managers and well-meaning organizations who go, I want to look after my staff. This is something that I really care about. So here you go, here's a benefit, or here's a well-being workshop. And you go, oh, but we didn't ask them what they need. And they miss that mark, and it's such an easy thing to do. And that's why then developing a bespoke series of workshops or putting policies in place or one-to-one support or whatever the needs that there are come out, that's the most important thing. So even if you're not looking for support from Renair Wellbeing or a wellbeing consultancy, I would certainly say ask your staff what they want before providing them any sort of advice or wellbeing support, because it's going to be more effective and a better use of your investment of time or money. So that's how we can support.
Okay. And I know it's very hard. This is a hard question to ask you because I'm sure it's really flexible. But just typically, if you were wanting to engage you, what would a workshop sort of rough cost be, just so people would get a feel for an entry level, really?
Sure. So again, if you're a bid member, there's 25% off if you're a Sutton bid member for any of those workshops, but they usually start around £300 and then can go up. But if organisations get series of workshops, then per workshop that decreases. And then for a full wellbeing strategy development process, that can start at around £3,000 for a small company and go up. But we work with multiple membership organizations as well, where we bring multiple companies together. So if you're 3 people and that sounds like a lot, and 2 other organizations that are interested, then that's something that we can look at. But those are kind of the starting prices to begin working with us.
And really, a small cost in terms of an investment in people, and potentially the opportunity to retain staff, where the cost of losing them would be probably a lot more than that in terms of recruitment. I'm going to bring you back in here, Helen, because I guess you must see a lot of this in the work that you're doing. That sort of short-term, I suppose, opinion that actually you can't afford to invest in that area because actually you haven't got the money, but then you end up losing a member of staff. I guess, you must see that quite a lot from an HR perspective.
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it, particularly as a small business, to know where to invest your money and how do you know you're going to get that return on investment. But there are ways to work out whether that's a good investment or not. And I think it is a relatively small amount of money that Khalil was talking about, that could potentially, as long as you take up what you've learned and implement things and do them in a holistic way that is a continuum rather than just a little pocket of something like you say, Khalil. Don't just go on one workshop and think that that's going to change things, because it's a little bit of impact. It'll be great, but it's not going to sustain some additional productivity and employee engagement within your business. I think there's also quite a lot of stuff that you could do that's free or is very low cost. So I completely agree with Khalil in terms of asking your staff what they want and what would be helpful to them. So there's a lot of stuff to do around communication first. But just as an example, I've implemented in our office a Wellbeing Wednesday, and all that I do is I just pop a little email around every Wednesday with something on it that I've found that might be interesting to me, or sometimes one of the team will tell me something interesting. So it might be some free resources that I've found on the Mind website, for example. The BBC had a wellbeing toolbox. I shared that, encouraging people to share things they've done in terms of their physical exercise that they've been doing. Tell us about when you've been out for a walk, what do you appreciate more now? And many different things that you can do that are free or low cost. Another example is an employee assistance program is something that you could implement. So that's where employees can have access 24/7 to a confidential helpline to discuss any issues they may be having. It could be something to do with their own personal mental health and well-being. It could be they've suffered a bereavement. It could be to help them with their financial well-being. That's another important aspect to bear in mind for employees. If you don't have the right finances in place and you've got money worries, that's very, very telling on your own well-being. They can call that helpline as many times as they want. They can access face-to-face or online at the moment counselling sessions if they need to. And it's really not very expensive. I think small businesses think that these things are only for bigger companies, but there are many, many different solutions available at a low cost. And I'm sure if Khalil came in and did an assessment, that they would be some of the things that he might be recommending. But yeah, definitely don't rule out the stuff that's free, and just talking to your staff. And Catherine, you were saying about going to your Zoom meetings one after another. well, you should have a think about that, and maybe you shouldn't do that, and perhaps then sharing that with the team and saying, I've noticed that I've been going to back-to-back Zoom meetings, and actually I'm getting a bit worn out from doing it. I hope you guys aren't doing it. Oh, you are doing it. Shall we all agree that we? Yeah,
we did all make an agreement that we would put a set time in our diaries for a wellness break. But the reality is, it doesn't always happen. But at least it's in there, and every now and again I look at it and think, oh yes, that's what that was about.
Just encouraging your team to go out for a walk at lunchtime when it's sun shining, and we have Teams chats, so I pop on there sometimes. I'm off my walk now, and when I come back, I say I had a really nice walk. I got a cup of tea on the way, and I saw some stockings, and something nice. So try to, as a leader, try to practice what you preach, but also really, really encourage your staff not to be online all the time, especially if they're working at home. And, don't send your emails late at night. Put a delay message on so that it gets to them in the morning, and things like that, so that you're not encouraging this ever increasing workday that's interfering with our normal day, because we don't have that break from home to the office if we're working at home.
Jane, from your point of view, obviously your main clients, I'm sure they're not only females, but the name of the company is Successful Mums. But for many of your clients, they've had to go through the stress of homeschooling alongside sort of trying to manage presumably their own work-life balance. How have you seen that impacted, and how do you think that's going to work moving forward now for your clients?
Yeah, it's been really difficult. And I think homeschooling for mums or dads or carers and working, they're 2 full-time jobs. So we found at the peak of the homeschooling, which just kicked off after December, we was actually quite proactive in going to the learners or the mums that were on our courses and saying, do you want to have a break in learning? Because we felt to give them that option was just a good way for them to relax and step back, rather than continue with our back to work training and digital skills. It would have just been too much. And also we're at risk of people having burnout and then losing them. So we suggested to people that they took some time out. Interestingly, it's about 30% of our mums said that they did want that break in learning, and we've had the majority of those come back. But what we did find is the people that were homeschooling and wanted to continue with their studies, for example, they was doing a lot of their studying in the evening, which, even though a lot of the mums got the studying completed, it's full on, because it's just 24. What you're doing, when are you actually relaxing? So I think it's about people understanding they can switch off, and there is always a way. And particularly for our mums that were working and doing homeschooling, you could really see the difference with the employers that just expected them to continue. It just drove them to the ground. Whereas the feedback you would get from the mums that said, oh, my employer's been so great, and immediately you're like, oh, who do you work for? So not only is it good for that individual employee, it's good for your brand reputation, because I won't disclose anything here, but I know there's employers that just didn't give the parents any space, and there's other employers said, just do as much as you can. If you need a bit of time, take that time, because long term, you will retain those people that you've been good to, because it's how people don't always remember what you've said, but they remember how you've made them feel. And I think in the last year, that has been so powerful with the employee-employer relationship.
Yeah, and actually, looking ahead now, we're not sort of out of the woods yet, are we, really, in terms of, hopefully we are, but just the challenges of what coming out, for many people coming out of a furlough, and for some being offered a part-time furlough, which, on the one hand sounds great, but then there's a challenge on that for some people around how they then manage work-life balance and school pickups if they've suddenly only got to be there. So that whole sort of issue, is a major thing, isn't it, that's going to hit people. And I think I'm right in saying, Helen, that the sort of furlough laws, the funding is gradually being eased out, isn't it? So we'll probably see more of this happening as we hit, June or July, when the money... Yeah.
So employers will have to contribute more. So employees will still receive 80%, but employers will have to contribute a little bit more. It's much like was supposed to happen, or started to happen last year, when we thought the scheme was going to end last year. It's a similar scenario.
And is that June or July that happens?
It's in June.
June. So from June, it's 10%.
Yeah.
And then it ramps up, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So employers have got decisions to make in terms of whether they're going to bring people back in full time, or whether they're going to bring them back to do more hours, or indeed whether they might in fact be needing to make some redundancies. So they'll have to make those decisions. So, difficult times still ahead for people.
Yeah. Okay. Patricia, from Successful Sutton Biz point of view, it's great that is it Thursday the 3rd of June that Khalil, you're coming in to do this? Just tell us a bit more about that, Patricia, and perhaps Khalil, you could pop that date in the chat.
So I'll send out the link to actually sign up for that. It's totally free to any business that's in Sutton. But I think we touched on it earlier on. That thing for me was that a lot of, as you say, larger organisations tend to have a bigger pot of money towards wellbeing and a more structured approach to wellbeing in terms of people coming in and delivering workshops, etc. Whereas your SME generally wouldn't have the overhead spend to be able to afford that. So that's why we work with Khalil to put that in place, so that at least within our district and within the borough, we know that this is an accessible route for people to at least kickstart the process and get a few tools together. The main focus for us is around management and how individual managers, it could be new managers. We know that a lot of our businesses have changed management staff over the course of the last 12 months. So new managers coming in, how they're going to then manage that process of people returning after furlough, what things that you can put in place to support people, what kinds of structures, and the approach. And I think the key thing, which is really important, which everyone has touched on today, which is totally free, is just having a conversation. And I think
which we found, haven't we, throughout this last year?
Yeah.
We've said that so often, haven't we?
Yeah, and we forget. We absolutely forget. We want to do all this all singing, all dancing approach to things. The same with reopening, the same with a lot of other things that we've put in place over the course of the last year. And actually, just having the conversation could highlight a really simple support mechanism, whether it's a half hour later start, a half hour earlier finish, whether it's a bit of a longer lunch break for an extended walk, whatever that could be. You might find that actually that just remedies an awful lot of issues from early doors, rather than allowing things to fester and grow over that period of time so it becomes completely untenable. So 100% have a conversation. It would be probably the first thing, but we all forget. So it's, it doesn't sound like rocket science, but it's so easy to forget to do that, I think. So that's a really key message for me for today. And
I think also, and maybe this, Khalil, you can pick up on this, but understanding what mental health means and is. I mean, in the past, it's probably been a bit of a taboo subject, like if you said you'd had a mental health problem, that would immediately apply that, that there's something major going on. Actually, it can be something really simple, can't it? And actually recognizing that the way you're behaving, feeling, acting is actually part of a mental health issue, even if it's down to not sleeping very well, is probably no longer a taboo subject in the way that perhaps it was pre-COVID. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think absolutely. I think the awareness of mental health and being able to talk about it and know that if you say, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit stressed or anxious," that fear of maybe not feeling weak or not good at your job is slowly disappearing, but it's not completely gone. It's not completely gone. And I think, even as an example, if we at the start of the panel, you go, "Oh, Khalil, how are you doing?" And I went, "Oh, I'm okay, but my shoulder's a bit sore from swimming," right? You'd probably go, "Okay, fine. We wouldn't really think about it." If I went, "Oh, I'm good, but I don't know, it's 18 people on this call. I'm really stressed and anxious, and I've been sweating for the last hour before this," it would still seem a little bit strange. So it's not quite on par with physical health. And oftentimes to help in our workshops and to help kind of highlight what mental health is, I think it's always easy to look at physical health, for example. And, if we look at a continuum where I'm trying to look, physical health on this side, be really physically healthy. And, one can move along the continuum, have a bit of a cold, hurt shoulder from swimming, more terminal illnesses on this end. Often we're very much aware of how we feel. We go, "Oh yeah, okay, I've got a cold or my shoulder's hurting," and we usually know what to do about it. Maybe it's, "I don't know what to do, I'm going to go to the doctor," but we'll usually then go, "I don't know what to do, I'm hurting or I'm sick, let me go to the doctor." And also if we move that continuum along this way, I usually have my camera mirrored. So we have kind of preventative measures, right? We try and sleep well, we try and eat healthily, we try and be active all the time, not only when we're sick. You don't go, oh, I'm going to finally have a carrot now that I have a cold. Whereas we try and do that all the time. And when we think about mental health, stress, anxiety, when we first say those words, we often go straight to mental ill health, right? We think about stress and anxiety rather than thinking that it's possible to be mentally healthy. And sometimes individuals take the stance of, well, I've never gone to therapy, I'm not depressed, so I don't actually have mental health. And so it's even that initial piece on, we all have mental health. It's possible to be mentally healthy. And then if we move along the continuum, right, low levels of stress, anxiety, mild depression, so many individuals feel that. I think the most recent stat is 1 in 6 people feel a common mental health issue a week in the UK, which is very high. It's a very high number, but yet individuals aren't as aware on going, oh, okay, well, I'm stressed and anxious, but it's COVID, so is everybody. I'm just going to deal with it and plow on, rather than going, oh, I'm stressed and anxious. What are some of the things I can put in place to help me reduce that level of stress and anxiety? So that's action, reaction, but then also those preventative measures of what can I do regularly every day or weekly to help reduce potentially stressful situations, actually induce stress and help me bounce back, kind of improves that resilience from a stressful situation. And also highlighting that stress and anxiety and mental health issues aren't all stress and anxiety in a sense, at least stress isn't always bad, right? You think about athletes, or before a deadline, before a talk, sometimes you might feel a bit of adrenaline, and that can actually help with performance. It's not always negative. So not just to kind of highlight that, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point you just made, isn't it? That there are sometimes stress is the helpful thing, and some people do thrive on stress. I think we're all probably guilty, and I am, of actually getting an awful lot more done as a deadline is approaching. Suddenly finding that I'm much more efficient and quick in getting things done because I have got that deadline approaching. But that shouldn't be. That's a positive stress, isn't it? And I guess it's recognizing the difference. And I think the other thing you said, which was around, it picks up on Helen's point, actually, that a lot of things don't cost money to change, but you need to know that you need to change them. And I guess that's where the consultancy thing comes in. It doesn't cost any money, as you say, to eat a carrot a day or an apple or whatever the action is, but actually understanding and knowing that is an action which would help towards helping a mental health situation. And I guess that's the type of thing that would come out in the workshop. So how you can help yourself, as well as how you might need external help in terms of that.
Absolutely. And I think that's the first step. Right? Helen's spoken about it, and we've seen all of the benefits that come from it. And as a manager, especially for well-meaning managers too, sometimes we can see, I care about my staff, so let me help them before I help myself. But you need to be helping yourself to have all of those benefits and be the best manager you can be and be the best source of well-being support for your team. And we'll also speak about how to have those conversations. I know we've said, speak to your staff. Some of you on the call might be going, well, how do we even begin that conversation? This is something I've never spoken about and don't feel comfortable doing. And that's something that we'll also touch on in that training session.
Yeah, it sounds great. Sounds like a date for the diary, June the 3rd, that's for sure. It is, as you say, Mental Health Awareness Week coming up. I've just looked it up. It's the 10th to the 16th of May. So again, another, I guess, good week to focus on in terms of maybe thinking through as a business how you might be able to help. And I'm sure there must be a wealth of information on a website somewhere about that. And you mentioned that it's, did you say it was, nature? That's right, nature. So using that as an opportunity, and I know Jane, who's had to leave us, is got another meeting. She has promised us she's going to go for a walk in the chat. So I'm glad that she's heeding some of the advice. But that's going to be a useful time as well that week to really focus on. Helen, just coming back to you, is there anything else that you want to just touch upon, not necessarily health and wellbeing related, but are there any, as we've done throughout these webinars over the last year, what are the things that people should be thinking about now in terms of more wider HR issues for companies?
Yeah, a few things. So thinking about planning for any changes in the business, as we've spoken about, so whether that's people coming off furlough, coming back to offices, whether the jobs are going to change, whether there's going to be any redundancies. Start planning all those things and thinking about how you're going to communicate and consult with your staff. Anyone on the call today, or the meeting today, is very welcome to contact me, and we'll have a quick chat free of charge about anything that you're concerned about. If you want to know about how to do a redundancy consultation, for example, then I'll talk you through that initial advice free of charge. If you've got employees that where the roles are going to change, then make sure you've got a good business case for that. That's usually quite simple to have in your mind, and people forget just to write it down. So if you write it down, it becomes very clear and something tangible that you can then share with your employees, so they understand what's going on and they can participate in the consultation process. So consultation is a two-way thing. And just for employers to remember that if you are going to make any redundancies, you're not able to use the furlough scheme for the notice period. So if your employees have got a 4-week notice period, for example, or if they've been with you for 12 years or more, they'll have a 12-week notice period. You're not able to claim that back. You have to pay them the notice period, but you're not able to claim that back. So build that into your thought process when you're thinking about how long you've got left on the furlough scheme, and when the rules do start to change in terms of the contribution that you need to put forward. And also encouraging your staff to take their holiday, or asking them to take holiday during furlough, providing you can top that up to 100% of their pay. That will prevent you then having to either pay them that during their notice period or later on down the line when they leave, or if they are coming back to work, it will prevent you having far too many people wanting to be off work in the second half of the year. So there's lots of things you can do around planning. It kind of all links back to wellbeing in a way, because if we have too many people off at the same time, then that's problematic. If people aren't taking their holiday, that's problematic. They should be taking holiday to go away and do something nice. I know things are restricted and we're not able to do the things we might want to do. But hey, the sun's shining at the moment, so perhaps now would be a good time.
Yeah, and at least we are allowed out now. I mean, there was nothing worse than taking your holiday than when you couldn't actually go anywhere or do anything. That felt a little bit difficult, I have to say. But we're out of that now, so hopefully that's a positive. Yeah,
definitely. And the other thing I wanted to say was just thinking about staff coming back to offices or places of work. Just thinking about how we're going to have to get used to interacting differently again. So we've been very used to being able now, certainly I have, to be able to very easily have a one-to-one conversation with team members that otherwise I might need to be having in the office. And also just thinking about inclusivity. So people may have got used to talking about certain things on a one-to-one basis over the phone or over Zoom or over Teams or something. And I don't know, you get little pockets of people with similar interests. People don't mean to exclude people, but that does happen, and that has a really massive impact on people's well-being and productivity in the workplace. Somebody said to me yesterday, in fact, that where they used to work, there was some sort of WhatsApp group, and one or two people weren't in it, and everybody used to kind of stand up and go to breakfast at the same time, and you'd be left going, hang on a minute, and apparently they were invited, but they clearly weren't because they weren't in the WhatsApp group. So, really, really little things like that can make such a difference. So managers and supervisors need to just be trained and be aware of those things and just learn how to deal with them and don't ignore them.
And it is going to be a culture shock going back into the office, whether that be full-time or part-time, and working out how hybrid working really does work or not. I'm sure we're all going to continue, those of us who are office-based are going to continue having to do some Zoom calls because we probably won't ever travel the way we used to have meetings. We don't need to. We can probably more efficiently do it on Zoom. But how that actually works when you're in a full office of people, and as you say, at the moment it's handy. I'm in my little office. I've got no one disturbing me. It's easier for me to have a Zoom call. How that really works in a busy office is something that we're going to have to see, aren't we? And that could be quite stressful.
Yeah, little stressful strains are going to happen, and little niggles are going to happen between people. And also our employers are going to have to think about the flexible working aspect. Jane touched on that a little bit. But what about your staff? If an employer wants everybody to come back to the workplace, but you've been working perfectly well at home for the last year, how easy is it going to be for you to say, well, no, sorry, you've got to come back in? Some people will be really, really keen to come back in. They've been lonely at home. They've had, inadequate workspaces. So they'll be desperate to come back. But others are really happy that they haven't had to travel and battle on the bus and the train. And, they can take the kids to school and start work a bit early and a bit late, and they've managed to do that really well. And if you're going to insist on them coming back, I think employers are going to have to think about that and work out how to have those conversations with employees and work out the best for both parties, really.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to just go back briefly to that furlough and redundancy, because that is a change, isn't it, to what was originally agreed as part of furlough. And just as a timeline for a business, furlough actually comes to an end, I think, at the end of September, doesn't it? So if you were, at any point, but certainly by the end of September, looking to have to make redundancies, what you're actually saying is that whereas before you could say, may give them redundancy notice, say in August, and used furlough to pay them, that's not how it would work anymore. So what is the actual timeline? What is the sort of last?
Yeah, if you're thinking you might need to make redundancies, providing you're only a small business and you're making less than 20 redundancies or proposing to make less than 20, you just need a couple of weeks to undergo a consultation process. And then at the end of that couple of weeks, it could be a bit longer, but say a couple of weeks, at the end of that process, that's when you would issue the notice for somebody to be made redundant. So they would either have whatever's in their contract of employment that they're entitled to in terms of the notice, or the statutory amount is 1 week for every year of service up to a maximum of 12. So if they've been with you for 12 or more weeks, it's 12 weeks notice, which is quite a lot. It's 3 months money. So you need to be working back from 12 weeks plus at least a couple for consulting, and then thinking about when is the best time to start that. Do you want to make full use of the furlough scheme right up to the end, when we assume it will close? I mean, we've been here before, but I kind of think it's going to close. I have said that before as well.
Yeah. Well, in a way, let's hope it does close, because it'll mean we're coming out.
It's a good sign, yeah. So we assume it will close. So work back and think, well, do you want to make good use of that furlough scheme for yourself, for your own benefit and for your employees' benefits, but knowing that you're going to have to contribute a little bit more. But bear in mind the cost that you're going to have, which is the notice period, any outstanding holiday that the people are owed, plus the redundancy. So people get a bit confused sometimes and think that it's redundancy money only, but it's not. You have to pay them the redundancy money, which is calculated under a formula, plus their notice. So you can easily work out what your costs are going to be, and you can easily work out a timeline. And if anyone wants any help doing that, please just get in touch.
That's great. Thank you for that. Khalil, just coming back to you for a few last words. What would you say would be the biggest piece of advice you could give right now to people as we're going into the next phase of coming out, going back to a new normal? What would you say from a health and wellbeing perspective?
Yeah, so I guess for individuals who aren't necessarily employers, you just kind of want to help your own well-being, I would say, look, don't necessarily look at what your friends or other people are doing and copy them and go, I've got to do that because now so and so has decided to start running and I feel like I have to, if you don't enjoy running. So it's find things that well, one is understand what your barriers are to each of the areas of well-being, and really write them down. What are your barriers to each of those? What's stopping you from being active? What's causing you to be more stressed? What supports you to actually be active if you ever are? What helps you when to reduce your levels of stress? And come up with an action plan of 1 or 2 things that you think you can do small bouts but sustainably over time. Right, so going from 0 to 5-10 minutes of being active, rather than going, okay, now I've got to start doing 5 kilometer runs every week, and being kind to yourself to do that, but really understand what the benefits are of that, because we don't give ourselves permission or time often to do this. But actually the work benefits that come, the just feeling well, happy, it's so worth 10 minutes of your time. And that'll come back in dividends, they'll come back. So definitely worth doing that. And then for employers, I would say, really try and understand what your staff need. As Helen said, there's a lot of free support out there, or free things you can do, but also if you really want to go into this sustainably and professionally, come to it. It doesn't have to be Renau Wellbeing, but go have an external body come in, figure out what you need, or if you already know what your staff need, get something in place that's sustainable, so people know, okay, it's not just a buzzword thing and we have a mental health workshop next month because it's Mental Health Awareness Week and then it'll be on to the next thing. It's great, we have 10 workshops coming up, or 5. We know that this is something that they've committed to, and then begin because it's so important. It's so important, and the return on investment is so huge. I mean, we've had a return on investment from one of our strategies that led to £250 for every £1 they invested. So it's a win-win for everybody, really. Happier staff, and then it's good for the bank. Yeah,
no, that sounds great. And a reminder again, then 3rd of June, I'm sure you'll be starting off with some of these key strategies and giving that's a good stepping stone for a lot of people. I've got to ask you, do you ever get stressed, because you must have all the answers, you know how to cope with it, but presumably there must be times when you can't cope with it like everyone else.
Absolutely, yeah. Completely. I empathize so much with. I don't think I could do my job if I couldn't empathize with people. Yeah. Right. I know how difficult it is. And ironically, one of our clients was the Priory Group. We ran a workshop and they're one of the largest private mental health care organisations, and we supported their mental health professionals from their biggest hospital on how to look after their own mental health. And we're doing some work with Active Partnerships and Sport England to help with employee physical activity. And so you can be the one that wrote the book and still struggle, and I still need to stay disciplined, and I have advisors and coaches that keep me on track. So yes, to answer your question, Catherine, so I do get stressed. I'm still human.
Yeah, precisely. No, this isn't a taboo subject anymore. It does affect everybody, even experts like you. But knowing that it's okay to feel like that, and then knowing what to do about it is a really important message, isn't it? There's no shame in it. Recognise it and do something about it. Is being the message. Well, I'd like to say a big thank you to both Khalil and Helen for joining us once again. Patricia, over to you for a few last words from you on this subject and more generally.
Yeah, I just think it's really good to be able to put into place some support. I mean, we know this is going to be an issue. You could just see it when people were put on furlough and that furlough was then extended and the stores remained shut. You could just see that this was going to be a bigger problem going over, when people start returning to work, how anxious they were going to feel. The levels of anxiety in the country are obviously super high anyway at the moment. I think there were some articles about that quite recently, that more and more people are reporting bouts of anxiety now than ever before. And largely it's down to the virus, largely it's down to money issues, it's down to a number of reasons. So it's important as employers that, we can put in place some support and understand that it's, this isn't a random thing. There's a lot of people going through a similar thing. And if you are feeling it, if you're a manager or if you're an employer who's gone through periods of anxiety, there's still an opportunity for you to get support. And the sooner you do that, the sooner you find a way to support yourself, the sooner you'll be able to support your staff as well as they return back. So I think it's just everybody should be thinking about it, whether or not you're a large or small company. But yeah, there's a lot of resources. As Helen said, there's an awful lot of local resources as well that are free, particularly around mindfulness and mindfulness walking as well, which is another big thing that they do in Sutton at the moment, which everyone seems to be getting involved with, which is very nice. But certainly, just, as I said, we're offering this on the 3rd of June. As many people as possible can sign up to that. As it doesn't matter if you're in the bid district or you're just a business in Sutton or you work from your kitchen table. If it's something you want to get involved in, then please sign in and join in the group.
Great. Well, thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you to you, Patricia, and to the Successful Sutton Bid for enabling these workshops and these webinars. We will look forward to seeing you at our next one. Don't forget that date, June the 3rd, when you can start to put some of this into action. Thanks you all very much, and have a healthy, happy, well-being rest of your day. Thanks very much. We're all off for a walk now. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. See you.
Bye.
Bye.